What happens when the future queen of a nation begins making decisions that even a king cannot direct? Is it a story of conflict, rebellion, or simply the natural moment when a daughter grows into a leader with a voice of her own? Today's story is entirely fictional. While it is inspired by the public roles of King Felipe VI and Princess Leonor, every private conversation, event, and scene is imagined for entertainment purposes and should not be understood as real. Let's begin. For most of Princess Leonor's life, King Felipe had been more than a father. He had been her first teacher, her guide, her greatest example of public service. From childhood, Leonor listened carefully whenever he explained the responsibilities that came with wearing the Spanish crown. A monarch, he often reminded her, doesn't choose duty because it's easy. Duty chooses the monarch. Leonor never forgot those words. As she grew older, they became the foundation of everything she did. Military training, official ceremonies, state visits, public speeches. She approached each responsibility with discipline that impressed everyone around her. The king watched with enormous pride. He believed the future of the monarchy was in capable hands. But there was one thing he had not expected. The very lessons he had taught Leonor were beginning to shape a leader who thought independently. And independence can sometimes surprise even the person who encouraged it. The first signs were almost invisible. During planning meetings for public engagements, Leonor occasionally suggested different approaches. Instead of following every traditional format, she proposed meeting more young people directly. She wanted smaller conversations instead of carefully scripted appearances. Some advisors hesitated. The traditional program has worked for years, one senior official explained. Leonor smiled politely. I understand. But perhaps people also appreciate seeing us listen. King Felipe listened quietly. He admired her ideas but reminded her that every royal appearance carried constitutional responsibilities. There is value in tradition, he said. There is, Leonor agreed. But tradition also survives by adapting. The conversation ended respectfully. Neither raised their voice. Neither tried to win. Yet everyone in the room sensed something changing. Months later, Leonor's military training continued. The demanding schedule strengthened both her confidence and discipline. Living alongside fellow cadets gave her experiences that official reports could never provide. She heard different perspectives, different concerns, different hopes for Spain's future. Those conversations stayed with her. When she returned to the palace after each training period, she brought fresh ideas. She wanted royal visits to include more opportunities for ordinary citizens to ask questions. She suggested spending longer with volunteers instead of only attending formal ceremonies. She believed genuine conversations created stronger public trust. Again, some palace advisors expressed concern. The schedule is carefully managed for security. Leonor nodded. I understand. But people shouldn't feel that we're always separated from them. King Felipe found himself increasingly balancing two responsibilities. One was protecting the institution. The other was encouraging the future queen's growth. Neither task was simple. One evening, father and daughter walked through the palace gardens after dinner. The air was cool. Birds settled into the trees as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. Felipe broke the silence. You've been challenging many traditions lately. I'm asking questions. Sometimes those questions create uncertainty. Sometimes uncertainty creates progress. The king smiled. You always have an answer. Leonor laughed softly. I learned from someone who always encouraged me to think. Felipe couldn't argue with that. After all, he had spent years teaching her to analyze every decision carefully. Now she was doing exactly that. Just not always reaching the same conclusions. As Leonor's public profile continued to grow, so did public interest. Crowds often gathered hours before official appearances. Many young people saw her as someone who understood their generation. Journalists frequently asked about her future vision. Leonor answered carefully. She never discussed politics. She always respected constitutional neutrality. But she spoke often about service, responsibility, and listening. Those simple themes resonated widely. Inside the palace, advisors noticed the growing attention. Some welcomed it. Others worried expectations might become too personal. King Felipe observed everything quietly. He never viewed Leonor as competition. She was his daughter and the future of the crown. Still, he understood how quickly public perception could change. One planning session became particularly memorable. An important national event was approaching. The official program had already been finalized. Leonor studied the schedule before looking toward her father. May I suggest one small addition? The chief advisor looked uneasy. The timetable is already complete. It would only take 15 minutes, Leonor replied. What do you have in mind? Asked the king. I'd like to meet privately with a group of young volunteers after the ceremony. The room fell silent. The advisors exchanged uncertain glances. It isn't part of protocol, one finally said. Leonor remained calm. Perhaps protocol can make room. King Felipe considered the request carefully. Every additional movement affected security, logistics, and planning. Yet he also recognized her genuine desire to connect with people. Finally, he nodded. We'll find a way. The volunteers never expected the meeting. For nearly half an hour, Leonor asked questions rather than giving speeches. She wanted to hear about education, employment, community projects, their hopes for Spain. Afterward, several participants described the conversation as natural and sincere. News outlets highlighted the unexpected meeting. Many praised the gesture. Others simply noted how different it felt from traditional royal events. Back at the palace, one advisor remarked quietly to the king. She's creating her own style. Felipe looked toward the window. Perhaps that's exactly what every future monarch must eventually do. As months became years, Leonor's confidence continued to grow. She no longer relied entirely on prepared remarks. She listened carefully before speaking. She asked thoughtful questions. She made decisions with increasing independence. Not because she rejected guidance, but because she had become capable of exercising judgment herself. The king noticed something else. Whenever difficult choices arose, Leonor no longer immediately asked, "What should I do?" Instead she asked, "What do you think?" The difference was subtle, yet profound. She wasn't seeking permission, she was seeking wisdom. That realization filled Felipe with mixed emotions. Pride, nostalgia, acceptance. Every parent eventually discovers that the child who once depended on every answer becomes someone capable of finding answers independently. For a king raising a future queen, that moment carries even greater significance. Another challenge soon arrived. Preparations began for an international event involving several European royal representatives. The palace communications team proposed a carefully scripted public appearance. Leonor reviewed the plan. "It's excellent," she said. Then she paused. "I'd also like to spend time visiting a local youth organization." Again, advisors questioned the idea. Again, Leonor calmly explained her reasoning. Again, King Felipe listened. Finally he smiled. "You've already planned the visit, haven't you?" Leonor grinned. "I may have looked into the details." The room erupted in gentle laughter. Even the advisors relaxed. The king realized something important. Trying to direct every step of Leonor's future was no longer possible. Not because she refused to listen. Not because she lacked respect. But because leadership had become part of who she was. The qualities he admired most were the very qualities making her increasingly independent. Later that evening, Felipe invited Leonor into his office. Family photographs covered one shelf. Official state documents occupied another. The room represented both his personal and public life. "I've been thinking," he began. "So have I," Leonor replied with a smile. "I know," he laughed. "When you were little, I believed my responsibility was teaching you everything I knew. You've done that." "No," he gently shook his head. "I've taught you enough to begin teaching yourself." Leonor remained silent. "I used to think leading meant giving directions." The king continued. "Now I believe leading sometimes means stepping aside and trusting the person you've prepared." She looked at him with quiet gratitude. "I'll still ask for your advice. I hope you always do. And I'll still listen." "I know. But sometimes, I'll choose differently." Felipe nodded. "I know that too." There was no disappointment in his voice. Only understanding. The newspapers would later describe Leonor as increasingly confident. Commentators would discuss her growing influence. Some would even speculate about changing dynamics within the royal household. But those outside the palace would never know the truth imagined in this story. There had been no dramatic struggle. No battle for control. No rebellion. Only the natural evolution of a daughter becoming a leader. The king had not lost control. He had fulfilled his greatest responsibility. He had helped prepare someone capable of standing on her own. That realization wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As the years moved forward, father and daughter continued working side by side. They still debated ideas. They still approached certain situations differently. Yet those conversations strengthened rather than weakened their relationship. King Felipe understood that respect cannot be demanded forever. It must eventually become mutual. Leonor understood that independence did not require rejecting the wisdom of previous generations. The strongest partnerships were built on listening. Not controlling, One evening, as another successful engagement came to an end, the two stood together overlooking the palace courtyard. The lights of Madrid shimmered in the distance. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Felipe broke the silence. When people say I can no longer control you. Leonor turned toward him. Perhaps they're asking the wrong question. She smiled. What should they ask instead? The king looked proudly at his daughter. They should ask whether I've prepared you well enough to lead without needing control at all. Leonor nodded. I hope the answer is yes. Felipe smiled. I believe it already is. And in that quiet moment, beneath the evening sky, the future of the monarchy seemed a little clearer, not because one voice had defeated another, but because experience and new ideas had learned to walk together. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this fictional story inspired by public figures, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. How do you think a future monarch should balance